Good afternoon, everyone, and you're very welcome to our inaugural event in our Thinking Beyond series here at J. Cairns School of Business and Economics at the University of Galway. This is the first event that we have in our new series of events where we're showcasing, I suppose, some of the current research that's going on that's relevant to industry. We're also drawing very much on expertise of our successful alumni and also including some key stakeholders from industry. And our panel today is a mix of all those really positive things. I'm delighted that the school is in a position to launch the event today, and this first event is in person, and I'll speak again at the end. Our next event will be an in-person event here in the university. So it is great to have, we've very great interest in our event today. The registrations are up at nearly 200, and the event will be recorded for anyone who is interested in looking at it afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Professor Kate Kinney, who is our Professor of Business and Society, who's going to moderate our event today.
Thank you very much, Alma. And as you know, this event focuses on the impact of digital technology in hybrid working and also how technology in this space is evolving into the future. And we're delighted to have some experts from academia and from industry join us today. But just to put it into context, before the pandemic, 7 out of every 10 employers in Ireland were actually saying they were opposed to hybrid working. But now, as it turned out, people have other ideas, and research that Alma, who you've just met, and her colleague Noreen O'Connor at NUI Galway, Tomás Ó Siocháin and Deirdre Frost at the Western Development Commission collaborating, research on exactly how employees felt about hybrid working just last summer, coming out of the pandemic, really shed a lot of light on this. There was responses from over 8,000 employees. Really, 95% feel that it makes life easier. And 1 in 3 say they'll actually move to a new job, even if it means taking a pay cut to do this, if their remote working preferences are not facilitated in the place they're in. So this is serious stuff for employers and workers alike. It turns out that, what are people doing? Working from home, people tend to clock more hours rather than working what they would clock up when they're working on site. And, for sure, quality of life improves. But what does this mean for other aspects of work? What does it mean for people's creativity if you're not bumping into colleagues in the corridor and discussing ideas? What does it mean for stress if you're trying to deal with issues that come up, but you don't have that face-to-face ability to speak to people? These are all the issues that we're kind of dealing with. And back to those employers I mentioned, there's been a complete turnaround since the pandemic. Now 7 out of 10 are embracing the opportunities that are being created by hybrid working. And the question that we're here to talk about today is, what about the platforms enabling these? What are the digital opportunities? What are the obstacles? And what are the challenges? So again, I'm delighted to welcome the 4 panelists we have. First up, we have Professor Owen Whelan, Business Information Systems, my colleague here at the Cairns School of Business and Economics at University of Galway. Second, we have Keith Griffin, who's site leader and distinguished engineer at Cisco Systems. We have James McLennan, Executive Vice President and Global Chief Information Officer at Liberty Mutual. And finally, Anne Nolan, co-founder and Chief Growth Officer at Snowball. So first, I'm going to call on Owen. Professor Owen Whelan is going to give us a brief overview of his research, which focuses on the psychology and human behavior of engaging with technology. Owen, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kate. So I hope everyone can, I just have 3 or 4 slides, and it's mostly pictures. So as Kate mentioned, I'm Owen Whelan. I'm a professor here in Business Analytics and Society in the University of Galway. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the research projects we're doing in the space of remote and hybrid working. So first up, myself and Anne O'Brien, we're doing a research project on remote working hubs, which there are a lot more of nowadays. And we're particularly interested in rural hubs and whether these hubs give people who use them a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And does that sense of belonging and community, does that spill over into the local community? So I guess the dream of remote working hubs is that people would have more time. You're not spending an hour or two in your car commuting every day. And as Kate mentioned earlier, well, what are people doing with that time? So in our study, we is more qualitative. We did in-depth studies to try and figure out, well, what are people doing with it at that time and what value are they getting from it? So for sure, people are contributing to the local community. They're, coaching the local GAA team, getting involved in communities and charities and things like that. But maybe that's not happening to the extent that we would have liked or expected. So other things people are doing at the time. So this is Ennistimon. They have a very vibrant hub down there. But if you go down to that hub when surf is up, it's absolutely empty. So everybody is off surfing, learning to surf and improve their surf. So getting involved in that personal development, I guess, which is a good thing as well. So other things that people are doing with the extra time that hubs afford them, well, some people report that they're just working longer hours, and maybe a little bit depressing. Some people are saying they're doing extra housework or more housework with that extra time. So in terms of the hubs themselves, and do the people who use them get a sense of belonging or connectedness with other people who use them? And they certainly do. So people feel that it's a very open environment. They can turn to ask to people from other companies and industries for advice and get help with solving problems. And it's even more open than they would have experienced back in their own office, essentially. So that potentially comes at a cost. And what we're starting to see is some indications are that people are getting more connected to their hub. Their hub is becoming their clan, and maybe they're not getting that sense of belongingness that they used to get from their office. So maybe that they're getting the sense of belongingness from the hub, and that comes at the detriment from the community or from their own home company. So that's something we're exploring a little bit more to see what are the implications of that. Another study we're looking at is video conferencing platforms. So because of the pandemic, obviously, we're all using these platforms a lot more. Zoom, like we're on today, or Teams, or WebEx. And what we're trying to do with this study is improve people's experience using these technologies. So one particular study that we completed looked at the idea of video conferencing fatigue, or also called Zoom fatigue. So we found in that study is that, well, the term is actually a bit of a misnomer. So even though Zoom fatigue got a lot of media attention during the pandemic, what we found out at least is that, well, people tend to attribute other issues to this perception of Zoom fatigue. So for example, when people were in the office and they're in a meeting, some people, they get a lot of energy from being in a physical meeting, being around other people. And when that meeting is moved online, well, they don't get the same energy as such. So it's what they're experiencing is a lack of energy rather than fatigue. And it's two very different concepts. Sort of things, and people are working from home, they have a lot of work-life issues in the background. Maybe their technology wasn't up to scratch, and they tended to attribute that to perceptions of fatigue. Having said that, we can always improve the experience that people have with these platforms. So one study we're doing at the moment, so this gentleman here, he's wearing what's called an EEG headset, electroencephalography. So we have a lab where we have these technologies where we can measure people's brain activity, the electrical currents in their brain while they're engaging with video conferencing platforms. So when someone is really focused and engaged, we can measure that with something, not to get too technical, called a beta wave. But if something changes on the screen, so for example, I can see a mirror image of myself, and there's some anecdotal evidence to say that when you can see yourself, you become more self-conscious, and even I mightn't be conscious of it, but my brain activity might spike as a result of that. So, we can measure brain activity in beta waves with the software embedded in these technologies as well. So we're doing experiments where we're manipulating people's experience of their video conferencing platform, where we can show them a mirror image of themselves and make that mirror image disappear. We can have camera on, camera off, mute on and off, and things like that. So we can measure, does this have a cognitive load for the person, even though they might not be conscious of it. So finally, a study that we will start next year, so in the area of hybrid work. So I think we're all aware that people have a preference for hybrid work, whether it's 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or some variant of that. So it doesn't really matter if you're working from home or in the office. A day's work is tough and stressful. So what I'm interested in doing with this particular study is trying to figure out, well, how do people recover better if they're working in the office or working from home? So one way you can make the argument that when you're working from home, you don't have that stressful commute. So in the evening time, you should be able to recover better. But you could also make the argument that, when you're at home, you have things going on, you have to manage the household and things like that as well. So potentially working from home could be that little bit more stressful and you don't recover as well in the evening time. So the way we can measure this is using remote measuring technology or, high-grade heart rate monitor, for example, and apps like heart rate variability. So what we want to do is get participants over a period of 2 weeks, and every evening they wear the heart rate monitor and we can measure their heart rate variability. So not your heart rate per se. So heart rate variability it's kind of counterintuitive. If there's an increase in the variability between your heartbeat, that's actually a good sign. It's a good sign that you're relaxed and you're recovered. So we can determine if people are more recovered after days work in the office or working from home, or what is, hopefully we'll get to the optimal idea where we can determine, well, what is the optimal arrangement? Is it 1 day in the office followed by 1 day at home, or a block of days in the office and a block of days at home? And in terms of recovery, at least, we can give an indication of what is the optimal arrangement. So if anyone is interested in participating in that study, by all means, get in touch with me and I can discuss it further. Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Keith now.
That's great. Thanks, Owen. And before we hand over, fascinating insights. People can contact you to learn more because you've given a lot of information there. And clearly the surfing community in Ennistymon is benefiting, while other aspects we're kind of investigating a little bit more. I know we've just surveyed our MBA students on the impact of hybrid working, because we're kind of trying to find out what's the optimum mix for on campus. And we're overwhelmingly hearing that being on campus is what people prefer, exactly for those energy pieces. And I guess maybe that's because of the nature of discussion in an MBA classroom, or maybe it's our fantastic MBA lecturers also, Owen, I might say. But you've raised a number of kind of issues around the well-being of the worker and the employee and their relationship with their team and their relationship with their management. So I guess it's going to be fascinating now, Keith, because in terms of your expertise, how artificial intelligence and particularly machine learning can deal with some of these challenges and shed more light on what they mean for us. So over to you now, Keith.
Great, thanks, Kate and Owen. It really is fascinating. It's an amazing time to be in what we call the collaboration industry, right? So creating these video conferencing, messaging, meeting, calling platforms. That's something that, apologies, it looks like my video stopped. It really is just an amazing time. This is a space that we've been in really for decades, going back with phones, voice over IP, seeing how it evolved towards meeting platforms where really it was about voice, video, and share like we're doing today. And even before COVID and before hybrid work became a thing, we were seeing the industry even shift beyond that, where it's not just good enough to have really great voice, video, and share, but we needed to look at more really different experiences, more immersive experiences, more natural interactions. And as Owen mentioned, when it comes to things like fatigue and stress, you can really be affected by that if you're living in video conferences. And of course, hybrid means you're not doing that anymore. You're doing some of that, but maybe you've got people remote. And our own studies at Cisco show that really in the high 90% type of range, that all meetings that happen in the office, or that 90% or so, will have at least one remote participant. So you still have to cater for that. You're still dealing with living in that sort of a video area. So let me just share my screen for a second and just frame up some of the areas where we think that AI and machine learning could make a difference. I won't even go to slideshow mode. I'll just show you this. So one of the areas is looking at how we really include people in all collaborative environments, right? So where can you apply AI? Where can you apply machine learning so that it helps with inclusion, that it helps with people feeling connected, regardless of where they are? One of those is in context, surfacing information where it matters most. Like, what's the most important message to read? That's one area. And why is it important? Explainable AI. Explain to me why you think that message is more important for me to read in the application. Another area is engaging with people as if they're in the same room, regardless of what environment you're in. So you could be in a noisy airport, you could be working from a cafe, making it okay to show up from there as best as you possibly can, and not seeming that's unprofessional in any way. So providing AI capabilities around audio, speech, backgrounds, and so on to make that happen. And then finally, to provide insights on how people collaborate, and to be able to just to see how you're collaborating and compare that to how you expect to collaborate. So let me just show you some of those things, some of the technologies that you can do with this. Now, I'm doing this from a Cisco WebEx device, even though we're in a Zoom meeting. This is some Cisco technology that I'm showing you. Some of these you'll be very, very familiar with. You actually saw one of them right there. The camera moved, right? So as I got closer to the camera, or if I just sit down the way, the camera's going to follow me. It's going to frame me up in a natural way, in the best possible way to show up without me having to worry about that. So if I stand to stretch my legs, the camera's going to follow me, and you're not looking at the midsection view, which is good for everybody. So that's something that is just the simplest technique, but it's actually using face detection to frame my face. And let me show you how that looks. If I just show you the raw feed from the video here for just a moment, what you'll see here is that it's counting the number of people. What side is that on? Up here. So there's one person from this face, which it's detecting. It's also doing face recognition, which I've opted into inside our organization. So my name is there and title can be added. And the gray box is the best overview of me. So this is what the system thinks is the best way to show me. And again, if I go to stand, that gray line will move up, and that's exactly how it's doing the feature that you were just seeing when I turn this off, and it goes back to zooming in on that. Similarly, if I was to go and do something like decide that I've got some sensitive design on my whiteboard here, I don't, but if I did, I could just obscure that by implementing background blur, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. Lots of meeting platforms have it, or I could entirely change my background. But we've worked really hard on things like accuracy, right? And look how crisp the line is around fingers or hairline or glasses. It's not blurred or chopped out. It takes a lot of iterations of advanced machine learning technology and data to be able to make that happen. So let me turn that off and then just show you one more. Here would be on my microphone settings. I have a technology called noise removal turned on. This was from a company we acquired called Babel Labs, a really, really amazing company in technology that creates a machine learning model combining multiple different noise types with speech, removes the noise live, and enhances the speech to make it better. So I've got that turned on right now. I'm going to turn it off. And let's say my lunch arrived, as is around lunchtime, and you get this in meetings. Somebody shows up, they go eat their lunch, they forget to go on mute. Let me turn noise removal on and do the same thing. So you should hear my speech coming through. You might hear a little bit of rustling, not too much. I mean, I've ripped the bag here, so I am putting good effort into this, but it's an amazing technology, and it takes that anxiety out of meetings and calls and contact center and various other environments. And as Owen said, it's really around creating that natural experience and trying to reduce fatigue, reduce anxiety, and show up in the most natural way possible. And then maybe the final area, then, just to show you, I'll jump back to a slide here to show you this, is maybe the ultimate expression of that natural interaction is 3D modeling and holographic representation. So showing up as you, but remotely. Let me just go to this slide and show you this. It's called WebEx Hologram. We have one of the first prototype systems in the world for this here in Oranmore in Galway. The brief we set ourselves was to solve the Jedi Council problem. So can we show up like the person on the left here in a full 3D holographic view while working on something like an engine component or whatever it might be in a truly immersive environment? It's an amazing set of technologies. There's a lot of trends around metaverse. Who knows if this is something that becomes a trend in the collaboration space? Who knows if it helps with things like fatigue? But I just wanted to share some of that really far out type of technology, as well as the more advanced AI techniques that we've been looking at recently. So hopefully, there's a ton of AI machine learning that I could talk to you about, and maybe at the in-person session or one of the follow-ups, I'd be glad to go into that in more detail. But those are just some of the top highlight areas of where we can apply AI and machine learning in meeting environments, calling environments, contact centers that help with remote and hybrid work to just make us have that more connected feel.
Thanks so much, Keith. I mean, you've raised some absolutely fascinating and, the imagination goes wild, but even just the idea that we're changing the very norms about what it means to connect remotely from what you're describing there, in terms of the idea of being able to connect from a cafe, being able to connect from a noisy place, how you even think about what you need to be doing to join these meetings is shifting. And that's just incredible from a point of view. And I know with my business and society hat on, these changes bring a lot of, I would say, questions around what we saw during the pandemic, issues around facial recognition technologies and who gets included and which groups can be excluded from those kinds of technologies. And those questions are kind of at the forefront of our mind as well. So just so much being brought up there.
And I didn't address that at all, but we have such a huge focus on responsible and ethical AI and created an industry-leading framework around that. You bring up great points around things like not introducing data bias or algorithmic bias based on the data set for something like even face detection, let alone face recognition. They're absolutely critical. And we can't operate in an enterprise or corporate environment without those. It's very different from the consumer space. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Because
it's fascinating. And I'm sure we could have a longer conversation offline. And I suppose at this point, I should add that anyone who's joined since we've begun or joined at all, please do ask questions through the feature of this technology of any of our speakers, because I know these there's a lot coming up in what we're discussing now. So thank you so much, Keith. What I want to do now is turn to you, James, because in your role leading digital transformation across Liberty Mutual globally, with your direct experience of AI and machine learning and how it changes jobs and the way of work, I wonder if you can speak to us from that aspect. I mean, we talk about kind of machine learning taking over the jobs of humans or not. These are some of the questions that people are asking. So we'd love to hear more.
Yeah, it's great to be here with everybody, Kate. Thank you very much. Just a little bit of background for folks who might not be up to date on a little bit about Liberty Mutual. So we have a large company. We're about 46 billion in revenue, one of the Fortune 100 companies here in the US, and we operate all around the world in the property and casualty insurance business, everything from car insurance, some of you may be customers there in Ireland, right through satellites, ships, aviation, environmental insurance all around the world. And in Ireland, actually, we have 600 plus engineers in Belfast and Dublin. So we're proud of what we built in Ireland as well. Just a little comment, first of all, Kate, before I get to the AI thing on the collaboration software. I'm fascinated by the work that Professor Owen is doing and Keith's comments on the technology. Certainly, a few years ago, at the start of the pandemic, we had to learn really quickly as we moved 44,000 people from offline to online within 6 days. That were raised this morning or this afternoon. You work with some people in the office and some people not, and so I'm really delighted to see more and more effort and development on the technology side. I'll tell you, one of the things we did find was that many of our folks, when they got online, felt that the online virtual work environment was leveling the playing field for people in many ways, where people felt like it was they didn't have to wait for cascading information down through the organization, and they got it directly. Everybody's in the same size box on the screen, and that was certainly very, very welcome for folks. And it's also opened up the opportunity for us to look for new talent in new parts of not just the country, but all around the world. We plan to do more and more of that as we move forward. In general, there's been a lot of discussion, as I'm sure you all know, about, well, what are the drawbacks and can we really facilitate high-level collaboration? Does the culture of the company atrophy if people don't come into the office as much as we would like? So we're still working to understand that. But in the meantime, we're generally trying to give people flexibility and allowing our small teams to make those decisions on their own. So that means that not every team is operating in the same way, but we allow the team to develop some of the norms themselves. Delighted to see some of Keith's technology developments, because I'm sure for many of you, like myself, who've been involved to be desired.
Sorry, James, I think the connection might be a little bit...
Unfortunately, they're still a little bit like second-class citizens with how we're also involved with examining much of the new technologies, the virtual reality, the augmented reality. We've done some experimentation with some of the metaverse platforms and so forth, and we see some amazing potential there as we move forward as well. Well, let me get to the AI question, Kate, in a little bit more detail. You know, we've been talking about, well, how much impact is AI having on our workers and how we work? And first of all, if you think about what we do at Liberty Mutual, we quote business, we process claims, we bill our customers and take payments, and have a ton of different types of parts of our value chain, if you like, where we've been applying AI for quite a while. So let me give you a couple of examples. First of all, one of the interesting ones, we've built a deep learning model, a neural network-based model where we ingest all of the external billing information that we receive from our external legal firms. So Liberty Mutual pays out about almost $1 billion a year on external legal firms who represent the company in different litigations. So they send us the bills afterwards, and we get billed for senior partners, for paralegals, for all the different types of work. And sometimes there are mistakes, so we get billed incorrectly for one thing or another. So we've built a machine learning model that can process all of the bills we get from these folks and identify anomalies or errors and automatically change the bills and make sure we do that. And that one model has saved us tens of millions of dollars a year. We have several others. I'll give you a few more examples. One is where we have machine learning models that intercept the quoting process. Think about a quote for your car insurance or your home, and we take in all the data and the information, and we enrich it or augment it with data we receive from other external sources. It could be about how your roof is built. Are you in a flood area? Are you in a wildfire area? If you think about the west coast of the United States, and we use those machine learning models to optimize the pricing that we provide our customers. Another example is, let's say you have an automobile accident, and hopefully you're not hurt, but you're able to take some photographs and videos of the car in its damaged state. We can upload that and ingest it into our claims technologies, and we can see by processing the photographs and sometimes the video as well, exactly the extent of the damage to the car, and make an estimate as to how much it's going to cost to actually fix the car. And we can process the claim immediately and send the money to our customer. And one of the most important things we know from claims is getting the claim resolved quickly. So that's really helped us a lot. On the more technical end of how we operate our technology and computing platforms, we've built some AI ops models that we use to process how our computers and our storage and our cloud platforms are performing. So we ingest billions of messages a week, sometimes a day, to see how the computers are performing, and we can predict when they're going to have an outage that might impact our ability to service our customers. In other areas, we use machine learning models to examine incoming quotes from our global brokers. These can typically be for high-level commercial casualty or property. Think about a customer sending us 50 different properties that they want to have insured under a global policy. We can ingest information about all of those properties, and with all of the different submissions we get, we can also try to assess using machine learning which submission is the one we should work on first, because it is the highest probability of being written, and it fits within our so-called appetite, the things that we like to insure. There are many other areas. We have a big focus on intelligent automation and data extraction. We receive all kinds of information from our customers, our agents and brokers daily, millions of files and emails and Excel spreadsheets, and we can run those through all different kinds of machine learning models that extract the data and help us understand exactly what we're seeing before we have to have people look at it. Hopefully those examples give you a sense that there isn't a part of our work and our operation that hasn't been affected positively by our ability to build these new machine learning models over the last several years. But I would say that, you know, we certainly have seen some productivity improvements and some good outcomes, but we haven't yet seen significant impact on the numbers of people that we have doing particular kinds of work. So it's more working together and helping people do a better job. That's the area we've been focused on right now. I'm sure down the line, you know, it will be possible for us to completely disintermediate some roles, but so far I would say we've been focused on adding value, improving the customer experience, and empowering our employees to do that in a much more insight-driven way.
Thank you so much, James. And I can see that the deep dive into the capacity of machine learning to have data work for the organization, and I suppose its own employees, is the key focus on that. So I'm now going to pass over to you, Anne, because what we want to ask a little bit about now is virtual workplaces. And I know that this is something that Keith touched upon in terms of the meetings, and Owen has looked at the impact on the employee, and James has looked at the impacts on the tasks we do and the processing that goes on at work. But can you tell us a little bit about how your organization uses virtual reality to change how it is that we work together and where you might see it going in the future?
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for having me, everybody. Really interesting and fascinating and very kind of pertinent issues that we've had from both James and Owen in terms of, I suppose, the way we work and how we work. From my point of view, it's probably better to give some context about, you know, who Snowball is and who I am. Snowball is a technology company. We're based in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I'm dialing in for, which is why it looks nighttime here. And basically, we founded in 2014, officially 2014, but really it was in 2012 when I first tried the Oculus SDK1 that I thought this is going to be an absolute game changer for business. So I suppose officially Snowball 2014, we are probably one of the kind of early players, totally focused on VR for business. And focused, I suppose, if you looked at the use cases, and I want to go back to that issue because I think that's a really big thing that keeps coming up, is use cases, is really around workplace training, obviously high consequence, soft skills, but also learning and collaboration. And they're all issues that we've discussed earlier. We have built a platform, and we built it initially to solve our problems as a company, which was how do we provide a mechanism for organizations to easily update, manage, and I suppose provide their customers and students with and employees with a virtual workplace, but also with the ability to undertake workplace training if that was what it needed to be done, new hire onboarding, or even to collaborate. And the platform really, I suppose, has been lynched around that. It's kind of unique in the sense that it's device agnostic, Android, but it really provides people with the ability to jump into a virtual workspace, put on the headset, and these are an example of headsets that we use. I don't know if you can see that. This is the Pico Neo 3, but the Neo 4 is coming out in a few months, actually. But it enables people to put that headset on, to actually enter into a lobby environment where they pick their avatar, and that's a whole fascinating area of research. They pick their avatar, and then they can be in the reception hall and environment and meet either their customers or colleagues and collaborate around different aspects that they need to do. I suppose the nice thing that you can do in VR, and you can say the metaverse if you prefer that term, the nice thing that you're able to do is, because there's no such thing as structural columns, you can easily interact and import from our web dashboard in a no-code environment. You can import 3D models. So, for example, a large piece of equipment or machinery, you could import it into what we have is an infinity room, and you can examine it on one-to-one scale. So that piece of equipment could be whatever size that you really want it to be. It could be an airplane, it could be a ship. You're able to get up close to it, exploding, and also kind of collaborate with your colleagues, whether it's on design, testing, or review, or whether it's with a customer. You're also able to, I suppose, from our point of view, earlier this year, and we think we are the first that did this, we enable organizations to upload their own VR apps on the platform, and we have what we call deep linking of those VR apps. So it enables 2 or more apps to be connected to each other, so that a person can get in the virtual environment, go ahead and do a place of assessment and training in another virtual environment, have bidirectional data flow back to the dashboard, which basically says if they passed or failed, and then they're able to go into another app from that. So I suppose from our point of view, it was about providing organizations with that control, so that they didn't have to just have a collaborative environment. They could also extend it by putting on what they want. I'm just going to see, can I share a screen here? So forgive me if this doesn't go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we're looking at the slides.
Yeah, cool.
And it's going into slideshow mode now.
Slideshow.
So there we are.
This is an example. Put on your headset, you're in the kind of lobby environment into one of our virtual environments. And this is your control or command center, which is basically a web-based dashboard from an organization point of view. It's obviously, I suppose you could say, cloud hosted. We're particularly looking in terms of going to that question of the future of work, the future of learning. It very much and what we see is nobody's going to spend their whole time in VR or the metaverse. Like, that's just unrealistic. It's a bit like nobody would spend their whole time on a VC or emailing or meeting people face to face. We really see it as part of a digital toolkit. So in time, it will be right tool, right use case. So you will say to your colleagues, oh, no, it's actually right that I do that via email. That's the most important medium, most relevant medium that we need to use. But sometimes it will be, it's stupid doing this via VC meeting. Let's actually do it in the metaverse. Let's actually do it in VR. And I think we're just starting at that tipping point of getting to that. We're noticing our customers coming to us now, and that's where they are. I mean, in 2014, I remember having meetings with companies, and we work with enterprise across diverse sectors, from insurance to industry 4.0, manufacturing, healthcare, professional service firms, and education. So really, I suppose it really is, all of them have the same kind of pain points and also the same desire to add VR as part of their toolkit. This is another environment, which is our lobby environment, which you can launch off. Here's the portal. As a a user, you would approach this and a contextual menu item comes up, which will take you to the different environments that your organization has determined for you. The nice thing is any of these environments can be created or branded with your look and feel. If you're saying this is not articulating our organizational brand look and feel, you can have an environment created that does. This is the reception hall. And when I made a mention earlier about having the ability to manage it, we now, I suppose, and this is kind of where we weren't in terms of this whole technology, we weren't in 2014 providing people with a platform with an ability to actually have control over the media and the assets that appear in the virtual environment. So all of these here, you can swap out what you want to put in there. Like we have customers who are using it, for example, for executive coaching. And in fact, one of the largest management consulting organizations, one of our longest term customers, and that's primarily what they use it for. So they would have the ability and do use it for their customers to come in and to learn about the different content areas that they might have, which is particularly about AI or the future of automotive technology, etc. So it just depends on what they're actually wanting to use it for. This is the command room, and this is going back to situational awareness, going back to emergency management. There's now the ability of really getting complex terrain data, which is rendered here for, I suppose, review and analysis, if that's what you want. So really acting as a digital shadow, if you like, of your real command room, or that kind of term you sometimes might hear of war room. And that might be the big organizations that have it, but there is an ability to provide and to have your own, no matter what size of an organization that you are.
Thanks so these much, are just
these are just some little examples, but I think going back to, and I just want to escape out of here, going back to, I suppose, the bigger issue of where we're seeing it, there's a really, I suppose, interesting point of it is part of your digital toolkit. It is going to be increasingly more so. I think the area of collaboration is really interesting. And one of the things that we're finding, just anecdotal evidence, and it'd be really interesting, Kate, in your research, if you unpack this more, if that's what you find, and if you explore the metaverse, is because you have a headset on, you have people focused attention. So we're all on this, and you might have different browser windows open, and there's different buttons in front of you, and you might be on a meeting with a colleague and at the same time instant messaging, etc. You can't and don't do that in the VR environment, because you are totally focused on what's happening there and with the people you are with. So that's a kind of a really interesting, it's like in-person meetings. You wouldn't take out your phone just due to sort of social etiquette. It's the exact same. So I think that's a really interesting area of exploration.
It absolutely is, 100%. And I certainly wouldn't admit now on this to be on my phone or having multiple screens with my head of school also on the call. But I can see hypothetically what you mean for sure. And I will say that a colleague of mine in the UK, I think, used technology similar for her Christmas party, which we were all on Zoom Christmas parties, and she was in one of these. And her favorite feature was being able to kind of angle over to someone that you wanted a private conversation with, and being able to have that embodied privacy as part of the room, which was completely unique. So absolutely fascinating. So guys, for those on the call, we're having some questions come in now. So I would encourage you to have a think of any questions that you would like. One from the audience is, so we have a little bit of time for questions now. So the first one that I want to ask is around this idea that organizations moving to hybrid mode, and the questioner is specifically referring to the tech industry. these organizations who had original goals of 2 to 3 days a week in the office are really kind of turning out to be much less, to 3 to 4 days a month. Do any of our panelists, and I won't pick on anyone because I'm sure someone who has a view on this can row in, what are the trends here because of the implications on, as this person says, the talent hinterland, but particularly around tech versus real estate and those different aspects of society that do become affected by how this is going to work out over time? So
Kate, I'd be happy to chime in a little bit on it.
Yes, please.
So we have 5,000 people in technology on my team at Liberty Mutual all around the world. And I think that the question is right on. We are seeing, a lot of people really don't want to go back in the office for any specific number of days. I think, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, people are happy to go into the office for a purposeful meeting. So if there's something specific, if it's a team meeting to collaborate on something specific, if it's onboarding new team members, a crisis management meeting or something specifically, people will come back and they'll get engaged. But we are indeed seeing a reluctance for people to come back to the office, and that's kind of lasting quite a bit longer than we expected. I think that many companies such as ourselves, we would like to see folks come back in the office a little bit more than they do today. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, we really think that we're worried about cultural atrophy and, some team members never meeting their teams and things like that. So I believe that there are positives and negatives here, and, we still haven't learned exactly what the implications are. The work that Professor Owen Whelan is doing, I guess that'll inform a lot of our learnings over the next couple of years. But I think the one thing that's for sure is that the flexible work model, call it hybrid or whatever you want, is here to stay. But I think we need to find a balance to make sure that we can take advantage of the fact that humans will continue to be at the center of building new technology, and getting people together is going to be absolutely critical in my mind.
And Anne, sorry there, James, I know that Anne has been meaning to come in on that. So Anne, over to you.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really interesting question, Kate. And I think that, Snowball is, we're 100% remote. It's funny, we used to be in person and didn't even really think about it, I suppose, like everybody else, up to the 16th of March, 2020, like probably the rest of the world. And then we went remote thinking it was for a few weeks, and then it just crawled into months and then years. And then we made a decision as a company that we transitioned so quickly. It was amazing. We are not a huge company, like a team of 14 and growing, listing in Canada early 2023. But from our point of view, it was it started to make sense for us. We really felt, as a company working in VR, it was about drinking your own champagne. So what better way to do it than this? But I think there's an interesting thing that we've learned. It is evolving. Like, I work with people I have never met. I've hired people I've never met in person. And one person has been working with us for nearly a year and a half, and I've never met them in person. So what it has enabled us to do is to expand our talent pool. So previously we would have only hired from Melbourne, because that's where we had our office. Now, basically, we have team members, the UK, New Zealand, Pakistan, Australia. So it really has helped us to expand our pool. And I think the other aspect is you build up, and we are still evolving this, and we're still perfecting it. By no means is it bedded down, but I do think a culture emerges, and you really become honed in on the mixture of sync versus async communication.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that is really, I think, I imagine that if you're hybrid, there are challenges around that. For example, if some colleagues are coming into the office and some are VCing into it, does that mean they have an inferior experience?
And that's something that, if I may, because I know it kind of brings up something. I want to bring Owen back into the conversation, because there was a comment or a question which exactly relates to this point And it's around that coming back into the office. And the question is actually whether Owen might comment on the gender dimension of this. So the gender dimension of remote working and hybrid working, and whether it might be involved or being explored in searching for optimal solutions.
Yes, it's a very good question. And I guess the way I'd start off is that one option for hybrid working would certainly not suit all. So only that, because it's on my mind, we have a graduate recruitment fair here in our business school today, and I've been chatting to some of the people running those stands that have graduated from here in the last 2 or 3 years. So young graduates, early 20s. And when I asked those people about returning to the office, they're mad to get back into the office. They've been sitting at home in a bedroom looking at a laptop for the last 2 or 3 years, and they would pick 5 days out of 5 to spend in the office. Whereas if you ask someone like me, with married with young kids, having that balance of maybe 2 or 3 days here in the office and at home. So the preference for me, or someone who's like me, I guess, with other family commitments, would be certainly a lot different than what you'd expect with a young graduate. In terms of the gender dimension, a very interesting question as well. And we're certainly seeing that with people's experience of video conferencing platforms, that women seem to become under a bit more stress or cognitive load. Studies have shown, because of features like the self-view and things like that, that genders react differently to features like that. So there's some anecdotal evidence out there, and in that lab experiment with the EEG headset, that's certainly one dimension that we want to look at. Is there a difference between the genders in these features and video conferencing platforms, and how people react to them?
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, not many people would be old enough to remember the whole furore around virtual working in the year 2000, and this was promoted across the EU as being the great savior of gender inequality in workplaces, and turned out to be, not as planned and as touted at all. So these things have unintended consequences, unexpected outcomes, and I suppose that's the real challenge and the exciting aspect of this going forward. In a second, I want to ask you about, what we have here is the aim of this, our event today really is to speak to employees, but also to managers who are now facing this brave new world, managing their workforce, managing their own workload, engaging with this plethora of different technologies, and looking for advice on how to move forward. So I guess, as we kind of come to the final minutes of the panel, I'd like you each to sort of reflect a little on this, and what would be your single tip for people who are in that situation, who are listening in today. So I'm going to start with you, Keith, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I would basically say that, like, the simple answer is embrace it, try it, but do it flexibly. To share, our policy around hybrid has been with entire flexibility. So we haven't named number of days of the week or specific days where you should come in, because how can you, right? It depends, exactly like James said, on workload. What's your purpose? Why are you coming in? It must be intentional. And people vote with their feet. So against the trend, my Badgin data here shows about half of our working population in the office actually on a given day. It's much higher than maybe most similar companies in the area, or maybe even in Northern Europe. And that's individual choice. It's because maybe a team is meeting, so everybody on that team makes an effort to be in on a given day. Maybe it's planning sessions for software development. But when it comes to focus time and coding, well, you can do that at home. But to that point about, if it's early career, you would need to learn from somebody. In my first day in 1994 as an intern in Galway, I learned from everybody around me. But if there's nobody around me, how can I learn? How can I develop? So even if you're, later in career, you have a responsibility to be in. Just because you can work remotely doesn't mean you have to. You've got to show up for your team. So I would say, go with flexibility and show the results. What's the compelling reason to be in and remote? And make it work out around that. It's worked for us so far, but everything feels like an experiment at the moment. So let's see how it goes.
So it's about experimenting, flexible, and thinking through what the purpose of each activity is and where it needs to be. Ideally.
Measure how you go, survey people, see, it's like Badgin data is one thing, but it's really why people are here, why they're choosing that. And even like the research that Owen and the team are doing I think that's going to have really high value. It couldn't be at a better time. So yeah, we've got to look at those outcomes and studies and see where it guides us.
Thanks very much for this, Keith. James, you were nodding a little there. I mean, does that reflect kind of what you would say to managers?
Yeah, I would say, and specifically related to not just the collaboration stuff, but the impact of AI and that part of the discussion as well. I would say three short things. The first thing is that on a day-to-day basis, things change really slowly, but over time the impacts can be massive, right? So you don't actually feel the changes until they sneak up on you, right? The second thing I would say is I think that managers and leaders should be appropriately skeptical, as the hype can often precede the benefits, sometimes by years. So you got to manage that experimentation investment with the realities of how quickly you can see the benefits. And the last thing I would say, kind of relative to the AI and the machine learning piece, is that humans will continue to be at the core of all of this stuff. We'll continue to be ever more entwined and linked to new technologies, but the human aspect is going to be the most important one going forward. No question about that.
Thanks very much for that, James. So appropriate cynicism is a key thing when it comes to these things, but pragmatism as well, I think, which is something that Keith was speaking to. Owen?
Yeah, maybe I'd just like to reiterate the earlier point I made about our young graduates. They've really struggled in the last 2 or 3 years. They're so excited to leave university and get their job, and then they find themselves sitting at home in their parents' house in a bedroom, for example. And they've missed out a huge amount. What Keith said, that whole informal learning, sitting around a lunch table and hearing the war stories from more experienced people. So I think there should be extra emphasis placed on those people who have graduated or started jobs, that whole onboarding experience, to give them that whole social experience, that informal learning, listening to those war stories. So opportunities like that, away from the whole technology side, that all happens around a water cooler, a cup of coffee or whatever else. So and I think extra emphasis needs to be placed on that.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that incredibly important to see where people are at and what's appropriate for that. Anne, I mean, you in your work, and congratulations, by the way, on the recent growth and the achievements of the organization. You'd encounter a lot of early adopters in this. So from that unique perspective, I mean, what would you say to sort of managers more generally around these changes?
I would say definitely probably the predominant are ones probably wrangling with the challenges of hybrid, as we've spoken about today, and what that actually means for them. In terms of, as people were speaking, I was reflecting on maybe it is, I suppose, going back to that, thinking about sync and async communication. Like it used to be that you would think, we have to have a meeting. We have to have a meeting in person. And then it was, we can't do in person, so we have to have a meeting via video conferencing. So maybe it's really about stepping out to say, hold on, is this something that needs us to have a meeting? Or is this actually something that we could share a document on? Or is this something that we could actually need to jump into a virtual environment on and do it quicker? So I think it's about not so much the are we in person or aren't we, but what you are seeking to achieve. One thing that I will acknowledge, though, I think that, Owen, you've mentioned, is the challenges for early graduates. And I think that's overlaid with where people are in their life as well. If you're an early graduate, you're wanting to make friends, like, when you get out, you want to meet people, maybe your life partner, maybe your housemates. I think the drivers are very different, and a lot of the time they're personal as well. And I think that's an area that is, I don't think we've settled on any one challenge or any one solution to that. I think it will evolve as we go on, and organizations will adapt and recognize and come up with strategies for that. But I probably would think that would be my thinking. It's not just about saying, how can we do it? It's also about taking in the async and the sync communication and collaboration, and where you can harness that to the best capacity as well.
Thank you so much, Anne. I think that, between the four panelists that we've heard from, we've really gotten such a comprehensive view across the landscape of these changes, from this idea of just how we are together and the future of how we are going to be together, co-present in different kinds of space, the Keith's examples and Anne's discussion of emerging technology has brought us into, and then how our jobs change, how data can be made to work for us, as James has expanded on, and right back to Owen and the worker, the employee at the centre of this, and their experiences of it, and the big open questions across the board that I guess places like University of Galway and the J. Cairn School of Business and Economics will be actively researching and finding answers to, or at least more questions. So I'm going to say huge thanks to our panelists and hand over to Alma to close the event.
Thank you, Kate. And just to echo thanks to the panelists today, I think it's fantastic to hear from our academics who are leading research in this space, and also from the voices here in Galway and Boston and Australia, Melbourne, Australia this morning, a number of whom are our own graduates from University of Galway. So it's been wonderful to listen to you and to thank you very much for your insights. Also, thanks very much to Dr. Majella Giblin, our Associate Head for External Engagement and Alumni Relations here in the School of Business and Economics, and also Patricia Walsh, who has set up and organised our event today. This is the first event, as I said at the start. Our next event is going to be an in-person event here in the university in early spring, and it's going to be a conference where the school is going to pull together a number of different panels looking at really contemporary issues across the challenges facing business and society. And that will be an in-person event. And if you keep an eye out in your inboxes, we'll be sending further information about that in due course. So, Gaurav Mila Mahagav Galair, and thanks to everybody who joined us on our session today. And we look forward to seeing you at our second event early in the new year. Thank you.